Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're going to try to combo people out on turn 4 thanks to the new Northwind avatar, the 5 mana 5/5 dragon with flying, saying when it enters, if we cast it, we can put a card we own from outside the game into our hand. In standard, that simply means to grab a card out of our sideboard, and now even in best of 1, we once again have a 15 card sideboard we can fill up for the avatar to choose from. And then the goal in this deck is to make the avatar and other dragons free to cast, because if we do so, there's a bunch of different iterations that can lead to an instant win. There's 2 methods of making the avatar free to cast. We all know about Omniscience, where we can now cast any spell from our hand for free, heavily featured in the Kona combo decks, where we can also win with a Northwind avatar. The advantage of this build, where we have 4 copies of the avatar in the main deck, is that we can also cast it for free using Dracogenesis, so that gives the deck a lot more redundancy, now with 8 enchantments that can try to set up the combo. Now, how do we get to these expensive enchantments on the battlefield in the first place? That's where Reenact the Crime comes in handy. The 4 mana instant exiles target a non-land card in a graveyard that was put there from anywhere this turn. We get to copy that card and cast it for free. So the tricky part with Reenact the Crime is that we need to be able to discard those enchantments, ideally without having to spend any additional mana on turn 4, so we can immediately reenact the crime to hopefully win the game. So we need a discard outlet that we can set up on a previous turn, and there's 2 of those in this deck. We have Quint's Insight, a 2 mana enchantment, where at the beginning of our first main phase we can discard a card if we do draw a card. So if we have this in play on turn 2 or 3, and then on turn 4 discard one of those big enchantments, we can already reenact the crime to set up our combo kill. And we also have the Great Door at 3 mana, an artifact that can tap to draw and then discard a card, so we can activate it on turn 3, and then hopefully save one of those big enchantments on turn 4, where we can now discard them and reenact them back. Now we also have Besiege the Mirror to give us a bit more redundancy besides just the 4 copies of Reenact the Crime, as Besiege the Mirror can be bargained, in which case we not only get to search up whatever card we want out of our library, but if its mana value is 4 or less, we also get to cast it for free. And conveniently, we can sacrifice one of these artifacts or enchantments to bargain, so once they've already discarded Dracogenesis or Omniscience, we can now sacrifice them, search up Reenact the Crime to get the enchantment back in play, and then now if we have an avatar left in hand, we can instantly win the game. And then to round out the deck, we also have Stock Up for a bit of card draw to help assemble all these combo pieces, and Nowhere to Run, another cheap removal spell, also happens to be very good against Kona combo as it can take it out even through Hexproof, and then it's also an enchantment we can maybe later sacrifice to bargain if we don't have or don't want to sacrifice one of our discard outlets. And then the mana base is also a little tricky to configure, since we need to support both triple blue for Reenact the Crime and triple black for Besiege the Mirror. So we have all of the good blue-black dual lands we can get our hands on, as well as the exclusive Nightclub, a Grixis-colored land that enters tapped to help cast Quint's Insight or occasionally the Northwind avatar. And then we have even more multicolored lands with Multiversal Passage and Starting Town. So with the Passage, sometimes we'll have to make a tough call between blue and black, depending on our hand. And then a 2 River Power Verge to round out the mana base to give us a few more red sources for Quint's Insight, while eventually still tapping for blue to support Reenact the Crime. So the mana base is a little slow with a few tapped lands and a bit painful as well, and it also doesn't feature any basic lands, so it is weak to Demolition Field effects, but we're pretty weak to control decks that keep up counterspells anyway, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. And then we get to the sideboard, where the only cards that really matter are 2 copies at least of the Meringue River Regent, and then 1 Terror of the Peaks, because the first card we'll tutor up is the River Regent, which when it enters can bounce 2 other non-land permanents back to hand. We can use it to bounce the avatar back to hand, recast it for free once again, get a second River Regent, which can now bounce the first Regent and the avatar, and then the last card we need to tutor up is Terror of the Peaks, where we can now deal damage equal to a creature's power when it enters to any target, and then we can basically keep looping those River Regents to burn the opponent out, or we can finish it off in style with a Storm Stormscale Scion, the only Storm card in Standard, where we get to make a whole bunch of extra Storm copies while also pumping up our dragons, so that can also quickly get the game over with if we control Terror of the Peaks. Of course, there's a whole bunch of other dragons we could include, but these are the only ones that really matter. I also have a Summon Bahamut if I maybe need to destroy a problematic permanent, but it shouldn't really be necessary. I do still have some other non-dragon cards that we can maybe tutor up with the Northwind Avatar for those games where we maybe don't have the combo but still want to hardcast Avatar to keep us alive. Then we want to search up some cheap interaction, maybe some removal spells or counter spells. So that's what you'll see here with an Offer You Can't Refuse. We've got Into the Floodmaw to bounce, Spell Snare is another cheap counter spell, Duress as a discard effect, Requiting Hex. We've got Knife Trick, which can also double up as a discard outlet if we don't have our discard outlets in hand to set up or reenact a crime, and then Bitter Triumph can do the same, and maybe some opposing Graveyard Hate for other graveyard combo decks, and some more discard outlets and card draw, Deadly Cover-Up as a board wipe. So of course there's a ton of ways you can configure the sideboard, and at the end of the day you just need those 3 dragons to really combo off, so you have room for a ton of other sideboard slots. But yeah, for now, let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play. What do we think of our hand? Got removal, discard outlet, stock up. Still need to find one of our big enchantments and eventually the dragon. I think it's good enough. Start with the sewers. And then Great Door. Doesn't seem needed since we have Quint's Insight, which I can play next turn and then stock up on 3. Turn 1 Otter. May have to know where to run that at some point. For now, still play the Insight. And then we can decide if we stock up or maybe keep up Nowhere to Run, play a tapped Watery Grave. So our opponent's a Blue-Red Prowess. Sleight of Hand's fine. Prefer seeing cantrips over additional threats. Alright, found our dragon. So, if I go for stock up and our opponent has a Spell Pierce, I could get punished. Not a card I would typically expect him to have. I think it's fine to stock up this turn. What's the worst case scenario? Opponent has like a Slick Shot and a Pump Spell, then we should still be alive. Alright, still didn't find our big enchantments, but I'll take Nowhere to Run and a Painless Land. So next turn we can use 2 removal spells. Who knows, maybe we'll end up hardcasting this. And Burst Lightning Face. And another one. Okay. Discard Passage. And then I'll just main phase this. And have another one available in case of any hasty creatures. Alright, opponent's going to bounce the Insights. Fair enough. Small chance they have a Spell Snare to counter it on the way down. Let's wait and see. That resolves. In that case, I think I keep up Nowhere to Run as opposed to tapping out for stock up. Just a little bit safer here. Opponent had a crab. That one doesn't die to Nowhere to Run. So yeah, that could be a bit of an issue. Take 5. Or I can shrink it now, which is maybe safer. So I can tap out next turn. Because a kick Burst Lightning could have been lethal. Alright, Sewers can go. Or I can keep the sewers, since if I mill the enchantment and draw one of our 4 drops, I could still combo. So then maybe get rid of the passage. I drew the enchantment, which now I cannot discard until next turn. I could still stock up. If they have another crab, I die. Maybe start with... I mean, we could also try the dragon. And then get a 1-mana bounce spell, which can bounce their crab. Could also get a duress, but I don't think that's going to help too much. Yeah, interesting spot. Maybe I start with a stock up, see what I find. Okay, so we do have the Beseech. And then... yeah, there's nothing else I really need. Let's see for that. They didn't have another crab end of turn, we fall to 2. Basics to pick it back up. Alright, it's go time. Discard Dracogenesis. Beseech, sacking nowhere to run. Try and get it back. And we have a second avatar in case they can mess with one of them. And get River Regent, play another avatar. Get another River Regent. Bounce both avatars. And get Tower of the Peaks. And wish for Stormscale Scion. And see if this works. If not, Regent can maybe set something else up. And there we have it. Super close one here against Izzet Prowess. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Well, this hand can put a Omniscience in play on turn 4 with a pretty high likelihood. And then Beseech can tutor for the dragon and hopefully win the game. Although facing blue-black, hoping it's Sultai Reanimator instead of Control. But Mistran's Village points in a different direction. Alright, play this tapped for now. Next turn, starting town. And we'll see what happens. Stock up is fine. And I can reenact at instant speed, so if our opponent taps out again, we can maybe get him. Yep, opponent taps out for stock up. So yeah, I think we win next turn, unless they have some 1-mana interaction left. Maybe a duress for 1 mana. Nope. Alright, don't really need the insight. Opponent's got a discard to hand size. And then either Omniscience or Dracogenesis. In this case, Omniscience is much better, because it does allow me to cast a Beseech for free, which I would not be able to do with the Dracogenesis. So there is a pretty big difference. Without bargain, and get our avatar. Play it. Find a River Regent. I could get another avatar from the deck just so I can bounce 2 of them. And get another Regent. And this is pretty fast to perform at least. Might even be a little faster than the Kona combo deck, even though they have a lot of overlap. So get a Terror of the Peaks. And then I guess we'll get Stormscale Scion here. And there we go. So nice turn 4 against blue-black control. And the surprise factor definitely matters, otherwise they might have been keeping up some counter spells. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand is slow with 3 tapped lands, but we have all the combo pieces actually. Insight as our discard outlet, discard Omniscience, Besiege for Reenact the Crime, and then Avatar to close it out. So the only question is, are we going to survive long enough? Turn 1 Swamp, opponent's pausing, so this could be a Duress. Nope, it's Goblins, so around those Goblins. And we drew another tap land, so I'm desperately looking for an untapped one. Don't need stock up. Alright, so I could now passage to play the Insight, but I don't mind just going tapped Nightclub, and then next turn I can Insight, play tap land, and then passage afterwards. Now Squelcher says their stuff has Ward pay 2 life, but we can still target our opponent directly. The Mischief makes some 1/1s. So yeah, just need to survive one more turn. Maybe look for a Painless land. There's still a chance they have something like a Shoot the Sheriff to take out my dragon, which could mess up my combo. A Vile Smasher's fine. And a Curse Crafter, so yeah. They should be dead here. Even drew the Reenact, so that saves me a step. And now I could Besiege for another Avatar if I wanted to. But I don't think that'll be necessary. And get River Regents. Regents bounce Avatar. Don't need to target their stuff. And get another Regent. Bounce, bounce. Get Terror of the Peaks. And yeah, opponent knows that they're dead. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand is decent. We have our discard outlet, Reenact, and Dracogenesis. So then we're just missing the Northwind Avatar to maybe win the game. Well, there it is. So now it's just a matter of surviving 3 more turns. Opponent blue-red, elementals, so probably the multicolor elemental build, which could certainly have removal for my artifact with Wistfulness. Although that is double green, so if they don't have an untapped green source in hand, we might be fine. But yeah, otherwise we should have lethal on 4. Quint's Insight gives me a backup. Do I have a preference? I guess we'll just go for the more mana efficient Great Door. And I can maybe upgrade Dracogenesis into Omniscience if we draw it, but Dracogenesis is good enough when we have the Avatar in play. Opponent taps out for Roaming Throne. And they're dead. They just don't know it yet. Could have looted end of turn, but there wasn't really a reason. Avatar and get River Regent. And bounce Avatar. Can't pay the ward on Roaming Throne, so I'm not gonna bother. Get another Regent. Bounce both. And get Terror of the Peaks. And bounce Regent and Avatar. Deal 6 to my opponent. And then get the Scion. And our opponent scoops it up. Awesome. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. This hand's definitely not perfect. Passage on black does give me turn 2 nowhere to run, turn 3 Great Door to discard Omniscience. Then I still need to reenact and a win condition. And then, depending on the mana here, I might also be missing triple black or triple blue. So the mana could hurt me, but I think it's overall still a keeper. And then now Watery Grave is a bit of an improvement. So turn 1 Godless Shrine, black-white, Zealot, a sacrifice deck. Yeah, Zealot's pretty scary, so probably need to take that out. Can wait and see what else they play. Zealot's gonna try and attack. Can remove it. They could also play Sephiroth at some point, which I could have taken out, but the Zealots can also function as a way to enable some of their sacrifice synergies. We actually drew Besiege. So I can, at some point, Besiege, sacking nowhere to run, get Reenact. So then all I'm missing is the Dragon, or maybe another Besiege to tutor it up. So there's a chance I could win next turn. If I draw Reenact, then I can keep the Besiege as a tutor effect. But in the meantime, we get to improve our hand. So happily take 3. And Serve on Dam is fine. Could eventually blow something up, but not right now. So we will loot. And we drew Reenact, so yeah, that's just game now. Untap, discard Omniscience, reenact it back, and then Besiege, get our Dragon, win the game. Wouldn't quite have worked with Dracogenesis here. So yeah, Omniscience remains the more powerful of the two. No need to bargain, since we're getting a 5-drop. Avatar, get River Regent. Can bounce the opponent's stuff as well, so they don't hold priority. And yeah, opponent scoops it up. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. And our hand has everything except for a discard outlet. So Quinn's Insights or the Great Door is what we're looking for. Could technically Besiege to find one of them. Although that's gonna of course take a bit longer. I think it's still good enough. Start with a Nightclub. Passage probably on black. Alright, found the Great Door, so that solves all our problems. So then now, maybe Passage on blue. Although, I can afford one non-blue source. The problem is this doesn't make blue if I don't have a mountain or island. So I'll just go for blue anyways. Turn 1 planes from our opponents. Blue-white and a bricks. Alright, so it's the artifacts deck, which is less of a concern compared to blue-white control. They could still exile my Great Door, but I don't expect them to. And now with stock up, we can maybe find a replacement discard outlet. Ah, there's a synthesizer. So yeah, if I draw an untapped land here, we win the game. And I've got a few attempts at it. And that's an avatar. And that's an untapped land. Easy peasy. So yeah, Dracogenesis just giving the deck a lot more redundancy than just having Omniscience. So we have 8 ways to combo. I'll just get Terror of the Peaks. And then I can get to Scion. And that should make it pretty quick. Alright, and that'll do it. Awesome. And we get to rank up here as well. Well, this deck certainly exceeded my expectations. Going in, I thought it would be maybe a slightly worse version of Kona combo, but at least in the best of one meta, where decks aren't able to sideboard in a bunch of graveyard hate or counter spells, this is definitely catching people off guard and getting much more consistent turn 4 wins than you might be able to with Kona combo, just because we have more kind of redundant combo pieces between Dracogenesis and Omniscience, Reenact the Crime and Besiege the Mirror, so we kind of have 8 copies of every important card, except maybe the Northwind Avatar, but even there we can still maybe Besiege or stock up to try and find it. So yeah, I was very impressed by the overall performance, although this is certainly the type of deck that heavily benefits from flying under the radar. Once the deck becomes a bit more popular and people know how to play against it, you're not going to get as many of those easy turn 4 wins, as people will know to keep up counter spells or maybe answer your discard outlet, even if it doesn't seem all that threatening at first glance. So yeah, that being said, I think it's still a decent deck to get some quick wins in best of one standard, and if the deck does become more popular, you can maybe make some alterations to keep up with the always evolving meta. But for now, I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.